Hi everybody, so today we're going to talk about the trachea. And so the trachea, as you know, is known as your windpipe. A lot of times people don't even think about the trachea until food goes down the wrong way and then they start to cough or something like that, to cough the food up. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing about the trachea is, like I just said, it's also known as your windpipe. Okay? The trachea starts at just below your voice box. So it's going to start at the cricoid cartilage of the larynx. And it's connected to the cricoid cartilage. And it's going to be at about C6. So I'm going to explain this in just a minute. Your cricoid cartilage is about C6. And then it's going to extend down to about T5 in the thoracic spine. So to give you an idea, T5 would be somewhere right around here. And I'm going to show this a little more clear in just a minute. Now, on this, we want the trachea to stay open at all times because of the fact that we breathe at all times. So the trachea is going to contain some cartilages that are C-shaped, and they're called tracheal cartilages. So it contains about 15 to 20 C-shaped tracheal cartilages. And like we said, these are designed to keep the trachea open at all times, right? To keep the trachea open. Okay, and we're going to be talking about these a lot more in just a minute. The back of this is basically open, so the back of this contains, or the posterior portion, contains something called the trachealis muscle. I'm going to draw the trachealis muscle in just a minute. The trachealis muscle. This trachealis muscle is going to connect the C in the cartilage that we were just talking about. So we're going to draw pictures of that. And then on the back of the trachea, the esophagus is connected to the back. And we're going to talk about the esophagus in just a minute, but not too much because this is more about the respiratory system than it is the digestive system. So the esophagus is connected to the back of the trachea. Okay, so now, just to reiterate, it's known as the windpipe because of the fact that you have air going down there. You have cricoid cartilage that it's connected to. Okay, that starts at C6 and it's going to go down to T5. We're going to draw this in just a minute. It contains 15 to 20 C-shaped tracheal cartilages to keep the trachea open. Again, we want to keep the trachea open so we can keep air going in and out. You do not want your trachea to be blocked, because if it's blocked or if it were to collapse, then what's going to happen is you won't be able to breathe. There are conditions in which the trachea get damaged, and I'll cover those in my medical pathology YouTube channel. The posterior portion contains the trachealis muscle, which we'll talk about some more in just a minute, and the esophagus is connected to the posterior trachea. Some more things real quick. This also, it is about between 4 and 4.5 inches long, just depending on the person. And it's about 1 inch wide. Okay, so it's about 4.5 inches long and it's about 1 inch wide. So let's take a look at this real quick. I'm going to just pull this over here. This is my skeleton, and I'm going to put my head on top of the skeleton. And let's take a look at this. So if I have this on here, if we're looking, you can see I have the vertebrae of my spinal column right there. Okay, I'm going to take this off, and this here is my C1. This is C2, C3, C4, C5, C6. Here's my C6 vertebrae. To give you an idea about where this is at, if you were to go and touch the back of your back, or I'm sorry, that lump that's on your back, you'd be feeling right here, which is C7. Okay? So we said this is going to start about C6. There's C7, C8, I'm sorry, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. So if we start at C6 and we go down to T5, that's basically where your trachea is going to be located. Now, I'm on the back of the spinal cord. I'm not using the front, simply because it'd be too hard to get down in here to show you where it's at. But again, if I go C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, there's C6, and going down to about T5, which again is between your shoulder blades, that's where your trachea is at. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a look at this. And I'm going to draw a few different pictures here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to draw my trachea. This is on an anterior view, so as if you were looking straight at me. I'm going to draw it like this. So here's my trachea. Obviously, this is longer than 4.5 inches long. I'm drawing it so that you can see it there. So this is going to be my trachea. Okay? On top of the trachea, we said it's connected to the cricoid cartilage of the larynx. So this would be my cricoid cartilage. Is going to be right there. Okay? Then above this, I am going to have my thyroid cartilage of my larynx. It would be right up here. Remember, do not confuse the thyroid cartilage with the thyroid. Okay, and actually I can put cricoid right in here. Okay, there's my thyroid and my cricoid. Just for fun, I'm going to put some ligaments that are in here also. Okay, so there's my trachea. Now, let's go ahead and put our tracheal cartilage in here. So this would be my tracheal cartilage, looking straight on it. I'm not going to draw my 15 to 20 simply because I don't have enough room on this. But this would give you an idea right here. This would be, if I go up and down as examples, this is going to be my tracheal cartilage. Okay, so this is my tracheal cartilage right here, and then this would be, this whole thing would be the trachea, okay? And then really quick, I didn't say this, but what's gonna happen at the bottom of this is it's going to split into my two primary bronchi, which I will cover in another video. Okay, so this is looking at it from the front. Let's take a look at this from the side. All right, and as a matter of fact, I think I'm going to draw my side over here because the main thing I want is going to be in the middle. So now we're looking at a lateral view. Okay, here's my lateral view. This would be on somebody who's facing this way. So this is my lateral view. This is my anterior view. I am not going to draw the larynx on my lateral view because I'm more interested in another structure. Now we're going to go like this, and this would be my cartilage again, that's in here. Okay, again, I'm not drawing 15 to 20 of them on purpose simply because I don't have the space. And then what I'm going to do is I want to show you that back behind here, we have a muscular tube that is called the esophagus. So this is my esophagus right here. And the function of the esophagus is basically for food to go down the esophagus to the stomach. Okay, now this is going to be important in just a minute. The next drawing I'm going to draw, now we're going to pretend like we're looking down into here. Imagine I cut this piece off, I took this out, and now we're looking down into here. Okay, we're going to be looking down into here. So I'm going to draw it like this. This is C-shaped. Okay, this is my C-shaped cartilage. So this is my tracheal cartilage again. There's my tracheal cartilage. This part here would be anterior, okay, which means back here would be posterior. I'm going to draw a muscle now because, like we said, connecting the back of the tracheal cartilage, you have a muscle that we are going to call the trachealis muscle. So this is my trachealis muscle. Okay. This whole area in here is going to be the lumen. So in other words, this is where your air travels. It's going to travel in here as it goes down to the lungs, and then it's going to come up through the lumen as it comes out of the lungs, okay? So again, this whole thing is an opening. I have the trachealis muscle there, and then behind this now, because if you notice, I have my esophagus, I'm drawing my esophagus right here, right? And then I'm going to draw an opening in my esophagus, and the esophagus is made up of muscle, so this is going to be the muscle that surrounds the esophagus. And for the most part, food is going to go in here. Chewed food, as you know, we call a bolus. So my bolus is going to go in there. Now really quick, one other thing I have right in here is I have a ligament that holds that together, okay? And I'm not too concerned about the ligament there. So now, here's what's going to happen on the trachea. And again, this is anterior, back here is posterior. As food goes down the esophagus, so here comes my food coming down the esophagus. This is my bolus. It's going to go down the esophagus. As food goes down the esophagus, the esophagus is going to open up where the food is. So now what's going to happen is as the food goes in, it's going to push this into the trachea. We said this was a lateral view. I'm going to put this as my anterior portion here. Right? So food's going to push into that. Now when the food gets down a little bit further, this goes back to its normal shape. Right? And then the next part that this bolus is at, it's going to push in. And then that's going to go back to its normal shape. Then when it gets down, as it goes down, it keeps pushing in as it's going down, right? To give you an idea on here, what would happen as the food went in there, this is going to expand. This is going to expand, and when it expands, it's going to push into this lumen. Remember, a lumen is an opening. It's going to push into this lumen. So now, all of this is going to expand. I'm just going to erase this ligament right here. All of this is going to expand down into here, right? As the food travels down, and it does this the whole way down. Now, it's not like this opens and stays open until the food gets to the stomach. As soon as the food's past that area, this just goes back to normal, and so does this. So here comes my food. It goes through there, right? This all opened up. This whole thing opens up, right? And then once the food's past it, this goes back to normal. This all goes back to normal. Okay, and again, I just didn't draw the ligament there. Okay, so that's why the back of this is open, is so when you eat, the esophagus can expand into there. The reason you have the C-shaped cartilage is because we don't want this to collapse. See, it's okay if the esophagus collapses because realistically, you don't eat all the time. We breathe all the time. So we don't want this to collapse, so we have cartilage to hold it open. Now, let's talk about this tracheal muscle right here, or the trachealis muscle right here, okay? This is under autonomic control. So the trachealis muscle is under autonomic control. So what happens is when you're resting, we don't need to have the trachea as open. So this will actually contract a little bit and decrease the size of the lumen in the trachea when you're resting. When you run, if you're under fight or flight, again, this is under autonomic control. So when you're under fight or flight, this is going to relax and that's going to open up and you can get more air into your lungs. That's the function of the trachealis muscle, to basically open and close the trachea depending on how much air you need. Okay? So again, it's C-shaped, so the esophagus can open up and food can go down through the esophagus. The C-shaped cartilage is responsible for holding the trachea open. so that way you can breathe all the time. And the trachealis muscle is responsible for controlling the size of the lumen in the trachea. So that's it for the trachea, and thank you so much for watching.